The Krothish warlord watched the latest hunt from the comfort of his war throne, claws tapping against the armrest as the display flickered with the final moments of a doomed species. The prey, a reptilian race with spindly limbs and primitive energy weapons, had tried to flee, their ships scattering like insects before the might of Krothish hunting cruisers. It had been over in minutes. No survivors. No mercy. Jorvac exhaled through his elongated snout, his fangs bared in a satisfied grin. This was the way of things. The strong feasted, and the weak provided sport before being extinguished. Across the chamber, his advisors murmured their approval, their scaled bodies shifting restlessly in anticipation of the next conquest. A display shimmered to life, revealing the image of a pale blue world ringed by its single silver moon. Humanity, the fleet master intoned, his voice thick with disdain. The last species in this sector yet to face the hunt. Jorvac flicked his eyes over the data scrolling across the display. The humans had expanded aggressively, spreading across their system and beyond with a speed that defied expectation. Their technology was crude but resourceful, their tactics erratic. A lesser warlord might have dismissed them as another easy culling. Jorvac did not believe in underestimation. His kind had learned long ago that the greatest hunts came from creatures that refused to accept their fate. "What do we know?" he asked. A second officer, smaller but lean with battle scars crisscrossing his throat, stepped forward. "They are territorial, violent. Unlike most prey species, they do not flee before superior force. They escalate." His tongue flicked over his fangs in distaste. "Reports suggest they fight among themselves more than they do against external threats." Jorvac narrowed his eyes. That was unusual. Most prey species united when threatened. Fear drove them to desperation. Desperation made them reckless, and recklessness made them easy prey. If humanity did not fall in line with this pattern, it meant only one thing. "They don't fear war," Jorvac mused. The advisors exchanged glances, uncertain. One finally spoke. "Every species fears war." Jorvac allowed himself a slow, rumbling chuckle. "Then let's see if they fear the hunt." The fleet was dispatched within the hour. Krothish hunting formations, sleek and predatory, slipped into the blackness of space like razor-edged shadows. The plan was simple. Challenge the humans directly. Establish dominance. Crush whatever resistance they dared offer and take their strongest as trophies. A message was sent, a declaration of the hunt, an ancient right that had cowed 1,000 species before. It was not a request. It was an inevitability. But no reply came. The humans were silent. On the bridge of the Krothish flagship, Warlord Thalkor's patience thinned. The hunt was sacred. It was never ignored. And yet, the humans refused to acknowledge their place as prey. "They cower," one of his lieutenants sneered. "Perhaps they are not as warlike as we believed." Thalkor's claws tightened around the armrest of his command throne. It did not feel like fear. It felt like something else. Something calculated. His instincts, honed over cycles of battle, itched with unease. "Send the scouting parties," he ordered. "If they refuse the hunt, we will drag them into it." The first squadron was dispatched. 5 ships, the best of their kind, each piloted by warriors who had never known defeat. They entered the void, weapons primed, eager to carve the first blood from this new prey. Then they vanished. No distress signals, no last transmissions, just gone. Thalkor's officers worked feverishly to locate the missing ships, tracing their last known coordinates, analyzing sensor data. Nothing made sense. There were no wrecks, no debris, no trace of battle. It was as if the human system itself had swallowed them whole. Then a signal crackled through the bridge, jagged with static. A transmission from one of the missing vessels. All eyes snapped to the display as the distorted image of a Krothish pilot filled the screen. His breathing was ragged, his crest flattened against his skull. Behind him, something moved in the darkness. A shape, barely visible. Under attack. The pilot began, but his words cut off in a strangled choke. Something yanked him backward, and the feed collapsed into static. Silence fell over the bridge. Thalcor's breath was slow, measured. His warriors, bred for battle, had been taken without firing a shot. The humans had not ignored the hunt. They had answered. And now, the Krothish fleet was suddenly very, very alone. A new transmission cut through the silence. This one was different. It did not carry the ornate, ritualistic cadence of the Krothish. It was not a plea for mercy, nor was it a declaration of war. It was a voice, low, calm, unbothered. Predators? The human said, his tone amused. Cute. Let's see how you scream. Then the line went dead. A slow, creeping dread crawled through Thalcor's spine. It was a sensation unfamiliar to his kind, one that did not belong in the mind of a hunter. He looked to Jorvac, who had been watching from his own command throne. The warlord's expression was unreadable, his talons drumming idly against the metal armrest. Well, Jorvac murmured, it seems we've found ourselves a proper hunt after all. For the first time in his life, Thalcor was not so sure. The Krothish fleet surged forward through the blackness of space, their ships sleek and deadly. At the helm of the flagship, Warlord Thalcor gripped the command chair with both hands, his claws digging into the metal as his eyes scanned the data streaming across the hollow display. The humans had answered their challenge, at least in a way, but there was no sign of them now. Silence. Empty space. It was maddening. How are we not seeing anything? Thalcor's voice was low, almost growling. Their ships should be here. The officer beside him, a younger Krothish with a scar running along his throat, hesitated before responding. They might be using stealth technology, my lord. It is possible we cannot detect them in our current state. Thalcor hissed in frustration, tapping a claw against the console. Then we will find them the old way. Scan every square inch of this sector. Use every trick we know. The order went out. The fleet scattered, each ship fanning out in search of any trace of human activity. The Krothish had no equal when it came to hunting, no creature capable of matching their methods. They were meticulous, methodical predators who had thrived for millennia, ever in pursuit of the next challenge, the next trophy. Yet this was different. After a few hours, the tension on the flagship became palpable. Nothing. No contact. No ships. No signal. And then, without warning, a warning light flashed across Thalcor's display. A single contact. Faint, almost invisible, but unmistakable. Status, Thalcor barked. The younger officer quickly read the data. It's a human ship, my lord. It's barely showing up on our sensors. One ship only. Thalcor's lips curled into a sneer. One ship? They send a single ship to face us? How predictable. He turned to Jorvac, who had been sitting motionless on his throne, watching the proceedings with a detached, almost amused look. We'll crush them. Let's see what they're made of. Jorvac didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the readings as if studying something beneath the surface. Then slowly he stood. Perhaps, my lord, we should consider a different strategy. One ship could be a trap, could be a distraction. Thalcor snorted, dismissing the concern. A distraction? From what? They're clearly running scared. If they have a ship that small, they must have already lost half their fleet. You might be right, Jorvac said, his voice calm but heavy with an unspoken warning. But remember, ****, they **** do not act like prey. Thalcor's mandibles twitched. For a moment, doubt gnawed at him. But only for a moment. Prepare to engage. No more waiting. We're taking them down. The Krothish ships moved into formation, the flagship at the center, flanked by two massive battlecruisers. They closed the distance between themselves and the human vessel, their weapons primed and ready to strike. The human ship, a small and unassuming craft by Krothish standards, showed no signs of fleeing. It remained motionless, almost as if waiting for the inevitable blow. Thalcor's lips twisted into a smile. They were making this far too easy. Fire, he commanded. The barrage of plasma and kinetic rounds erupted from the Krothish fleet, the weapons designed to obliterate anything in their path. They struck the human ship, tearing through its hull with brutal efficiency. For a moment, it seemed as though the ship was done. Its shields flickered and failed, and its structure buckled under the pressure. Then, without warning, the ship moved. A sudden acceleration. It dodged and weaved through the incoming fire, its movements erratic but strangely calculated. It wasn't fleeing, it was maneuvering, as if the crew knew exactly where to place each strike and where to avoid the Krothish barrage. What in the name of the Great Hunt is this? Thalcor snarled. The human ship zigged and zagged through the fire impossibly fast. It danced between debris and explosions, using the debris field to shield itself from the worst of the fire. And every now and then it would fire back. Each shot was precise, cutting through the Krothish battlecruisers with surgical precision. How are they doing this? Thalcor's voice was tinged with disbelief. They should be dead. The math is wrong. Jorvac, his expression unreadable, said nothing at first. He was watching with a mixture of awe and unease. The Krothish fleet had taken down far stronger enemies with less effort. This should not be happening. Adjust our targeting, Thalcor ordered. Focus fire on their engines. The fleet responded, every ship now locking onto the human vessel. The human ship, though battered, didn't slow down. It seemed to pull energy from nowhere, leaping forward in bursts, avoiding incoming fire while lashing out with its own. The fire wasn't random. It was deliberate. Each shot struck weak points on the Krothish ships, hitting critical systems and causing them to spark and burn. This is impossible, Thalcor muttered. They're not supposed to be this coordinated. He trailed off, staring at the human ship with wide eyes. Jorvac finally spoke, his voice steady, almost amused. No, warlord. It's not impossible. It's human. For the first time, Thalcor felt the cold sting of doubt. This was no random species, no helpless prey waiting to be slaughtered. These humans were something else, something worse. The human ship fired again, this time hitting a Krothish cruiser directly in its power core. The ship shuddered, a massive explosion tearing through its hull. The Krothish fleet commander's eyes went wide. They're targeting our vulnerabilities. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Jorvac replied, the edge of his voice sharpening. They fight like us. They don't follow the rules. They don't fear death. The flagship continued to engage the human ship, but it was clear now that this was not a simple hunt. The Krothish were being outmaneuvered, outwitted. Fall back, Thalcor growled. Retreat. We need a new plan. But as the fleet began to pull back, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. The human ship, battered but unbroken, did not chase them. It did not pursue. It simply waited, as if toying with them. It was a challenge, an open dare. Thalcor stared at the ship on the viewscreen. A deep unease settled in his chest. No species fought like this. No species adapted so quickly. The humans had barely engaged, yet already they were turning the tide. It was a feeling Thalcor knew all too well. They were the prey now, and they didn't even know it yet. Retreat, he said again, his voice heavy with something far less than certainty. We're not done here, but we will be. Soon. As the fleet jumped into slipspace, Thalcor's mind raced. The humans were something new. And if they were anything like Jorvac suggested, that could be the worst thing that had ever happened to the Krothish. The warlord's eyes darkened. It wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was war. The tension aboard the Krothish flagship was thick enough to slice through with a claw. Thalcor paced the command deck, his steps heavy with frustration. The retreat had been a failure, and every instinct screamed that something had gone terribly wrong. He had been alive long enough to recognize when the battlefield had shifted against him, and this was one of those times. Jorvac was unusually quiet, perched on his war throne, his eyes distant, focused on the star map that displayed the movements of the fleet. He had said little after the retreat, and Thalcor's unease grew with each passing second. "How much longer are we going to play this game, Jorvac?" Thalcor snapped, his voice low but intense. The older warlord didn't flinch. "I don't think it's a game, Thalcor. You saw what happened. They adapt faster than we do. Faster than any prey we've ever faced." Thalcor stopped mid-stride, his hand tightening into a fist. "They're not supposed to adapt like that. They shouldn't have been able to damage our ships, to target our weaknesses. The humans are weak, they should be running in fear, not picking us apart." His voice dropped to a growl. "This isn't how it's supposed to go." Jorvac leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Perhaps this isn't how you thought it would go, but it is how it is." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle between them. "You underestimated them." "I did not." Thalcor turned away, his claws digging into the side of the console, the hum of the ship around him doing little to ease his frustration. "I should have crushed them. I should have." "You didn't," Jorvac interrupted, his tone firm. "And now we must find another way." The silence that followed was thick, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engines. Thalcor's mind raced, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. The humans weren't anything special, at least they shouldn't have been. Their ships were crude, their technology primitive compared to the Krothish. And yet, they fought with a ferocity that had been unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The initial loss had been a shock, but it wasn't just that. It was the feeling, the unsettling sense that they were being hunted, not the hunters. "Send word to the fleet commanders," Thalcor ordered finally. "We'll regroup, reinforce our positions, and prepare for another strike." But this time, his voice trailed off as the realization hit him. He didn't know what to expect from the humans anymore. Jorvac's eyes glinted. "You know, Warlord, there's something about them. Something that doesn't fit into our usual patterns. It's not about their technology or their tactics. It's about their nature. The humans, they fight with something more." Thalcor turned to face Jorvac, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "They fight with desperation. And that's dangerous. Desperation is unpredictable. And in the right hands—" Jorvac paused, his gaze distant once more. "Desperation can be a weapon stronger than any fleet." Thalcor felt a flicker of doubt. Desperation? The idea rattled him more than he cared to admit. He had always prided himself on his ability to predict his enemies' actions, to read their weaknesses. But the humans had thrown that predictability out the airlock. Their desperation had not made them weak. It had made them dangerous. "Then what do we do?" Thalcor asked, his voice tense. "If their desperation is their strength, we can't just keep throwing ships at them. They'll tear us apart." Jorvac stood slowly, a small, amused smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "No, Warlord, we can't just keep throwing ships at them. But I have an idea. A different kind of hunt." Thalcor frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we give them a different kind of prey," Jorvac said, his voice like steel. "We will use their desperation against them. Draw them into a trap they cannot escape." Thalcor tilted his head, considering the older warlord's words. It was risky. No, it was more than risky, it was dangerous. But in the back of his mind, he knew that Jorvac had never been wrong about these things. If anyone could turn the tide, it was him. "What's the plan?" Thalcor asked. Jorvac's smile widened. "We make them think they've won. We retreat, this time not in failure, but in feigned defeat. We draw them in. They'll come after us, and when they do, we'll close the trap. They won't know what hit them." Thalcor's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting we run again? And bait them? After the last failure?" Jorvac's gaze locked with his, steady and unwavering. "Yes, warlord. Only this time we make them chase us. We show them a weakness, and then we crush them." Thalcor's heart skipped a beat. The plan was audacious, but there was a cold brilliance in it. If the humans were driven by desperation, then giving them what they wanted, the illusion of victory, would make them more dangerous than ever. He turned back to the tactical screen, his mind running through the logistics. The Krothish fleet was still formidable, but it was battered. To lead the humans into a trap, they would have to make sure they were fully prepared. One slip, and it would be the Krothish that would fall. But Jorvac was right. The humans were not the prey here. They were becoming something else. Something that could no longer be hunted with brute force. They would need to outthink them, outmaneuver them, make them believe they had the upper hand, then pull the rug out from under them. Thalcor turned back to his war throne, a new fire burning in his chest. "Very well," he said, his voice steady now. "We bait them, but we do not just bait them. We make them beg for the kill, and when they do, we strike." Jorvac nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Exactly, warlord. This is no longer about hunting. This is about war. And I believe we have only just begun." As Thalcor sat back in his chair, he could feel the shift in the air around him. The Krothish had always been the hunters. But for the first time, they were about to face a species that fought on their terms. The humans were a challenge, a deadly one, but Thalcor was not ready to surrender his title as the apex predator just yet. The trap would be set. The game was on, and Thalcor was beginning to wonder just how far the humans were willing to go. The battle had become a waiting game. Thalcor paced the command deck again, his thoughts spinning as the Krothish fleet moved into the final stages of their feigned retreat. The human ships had followed them without hesitation, and the warlord couldn't help but admire their tenacity. It was a dangerous trait, one that would make them difficult to crush. The humans did not hesitate, they did not question. They pursued, and that pursuit would be their undoing. Thalcor's eyes lingered on the tactical display. The human fleet had split, some following the Krothish ships in an obvious pursuit, others hanging back. The warlord had expected this. Humans were often overconfident in their abilities. They thought they understood the field of war, thought they could predict the next move. It would be their fatal mistake. "How long until they're within range?" Thalcor asked, his voice cutting through the tense air of the command deck. The officer at the console looked up, his hands flying over the controls. "They'll be within range in 20 standard minutes, my lord." Thalcor grunted in approval. "We'll hold. Let them come." The Krothish fleet was almost completely in formation now, with the few scattered ships that had been a part of the retreat now rejoining the main force. Each ship in the fleet had its role. The smaller craft, acting as decoys, would play their part, running interference and drawing the human ships closer. The larger battlecruisers, laden with advanced weaponry, would strike at the perfect moment. The trap had been carefully laid. Jorvac remained eerily quiet, perched on his throne. Thalcor could feel the older warlord's gaze on him, as if waiting for something. It unsettled him. He wasn't used to being watched so intently. But Jorvac had always been the strategist, the one who saw the board in ways Thalcor could not. "There is no turning back now," Jorvac said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Thalcor didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. His mind was racing, calculating, analyzing. There was something about the humans, something in their eyes, their movements that made him hesitate. They were too determined. It made them unpredictable. But that wasn't enough to stop him. He would not allow it. They had underestimated him once. Now they would see how the hunt really ended. The minutes dragged on, each one stretching longer than the last. Falcor's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair, his impatience growing. The human fleet had closed the gap, now just a few kilometers out. He could almost feel the pressure from their pursuit, a palpable energy that threatened to consume them both. Then the signal came, a sudden shift in the human ship's formations. "They've split again," the officer said, his voice tinged with surprise. "Some of their ships are changing course, flanking our left side." Falcor's lips curled into a grin. They were predictable, after all. The humans were taking the bait. They didn't realize they were being lured into a dead zone. The Krothish fleet was already set up for the ambush. The larger battlecruisers were in position. The time had come. "Activate the ambush," Falcor commanded. The first wave of fire erupted, a concentrated barrage that slammed into the unsuspecting human ships, tearing through their shields and punching holes into their hulls. The humans returned fire immediately, but it was too late. The trap had closed. The Krothish were already surrounding them, outnumbering them, overwhelming them with sheer firepower. Yet, to Falcor's surprise, the humans didn't break. They didn't retreat. Their ships wove through the chaos, weaving in and out of the barrage with a strange, almost unnatural precision. The humans were fighting back with all the rage of cornered animals. It was as if they were daring death itself to take them. "Why aren't they breaking?" Falcor hissed, his eyes narrowing. Jorvac looked on, his face unreadable. "They are fighting to the death. It is what we expected from them. But they are not just reacting. They are adapting. They are learning." Falcor turned to his strategist, his gaze hard. "What do you mean?" Jorvac's eyes glinted with a cold, calculating intensity. "The humans are not playing by the rules. They never have. Their ships are shifting their patterns faster than we can track them. They're adjusting their tactics with every shot we fire. And they know we are making mistakes. They're learning from us." Falcor's heart skipped. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. The humans were not just desperate. They were smart. They were evolving in real time. Their desperation had become a strength. They were not waiting for victory, they were creating it. The thought unsettled him more than anything else had in years. The Krothish were the greatest predators in the galaxy. They had evolved to be the apex species. But now, this inferior species was turning the hunt back on them. They were on the verge of defeating the Krothish not with superior firepower, but with their minds. "Change our strategy," Falcor growled. "We need to break their line, or we will lose." The officer at the console responded quickly. "We've already damaged many of their ships, but they keep pressing forward. The smaller ships are harder to track, and their maneuvers are becoming unpredictable." Falcor's eyes flicked to the view screen, where the human ships now circled the Krothish fleet like sharks, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The warlord's mind raced. They had underestimated them. The humans had refused to fold. And the Krothish, for the first time in a long while, were the ones on the defensive. "Countermeasures," Falcor barked. "Activate all defenses. Shield up, concentrate fire. We cannot allow them to gain the upper hand." But no matter how much they fired back, no matter how many of the human ships fell, more kept coming. It was like fighting shadows. Every shot, every movement was calculated. Every human ship was doing exactly what it needed to survive. And they weren't doing it for survival anymore. They were doing it for victory. A deep, uneasy silence fell over the flagship. Falcor could feel it now. The humans weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. They were willing to burn everything, tear down entire fleets, and leave nothing in their wake. They were no longer prey. They were hunters. Jorvac leaned forward, his eyes hard as stone. "I said before that they fight with desperation. But now I see it. They are not desperate. They are driven. And that is something we have never faced. Thalcor's mind reeled. He had always believed in the Krothish superiority, in the purity of their hunt. But now, with the humans closing in, his conviction wavered. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was war. And in war, there were no guarantees. "We're losing," Thalcor muttered, the realization heavy on his chest. Jorvak's gaze softened for the first time. "Not yet. But if we don't adapt, we will be. You must learn, Warlord. You must learn what they already know." Thalcor stared at the viewscreen, the human ships darting through his fleet, relentless in their pursuit. He had underestimated them, thought them weak. But they were anything but. They were becoming something the Krothish had never encountered. Equals. The realization struck him like a gut punch. The hunt was over, and the humans had won.